We'll call the special council meeting to order, City of Marshfield, Wisconsin, Tuesday, November 28th. Call to order, roll call. All present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Report from staff on information requested by council at the November 21st meeting presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Sorry about that, it wasn't on for me. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to this meeting. I appreciate that we're still trying to work our way through this process, and hopefully this will be a good discussion and a good result. I want to start out by a couple things. I put on your table tonight the proposed changes that I had made for last week, and I realized that those were not embraced, but I want to call your attention to the yellow highlighted items. I'm not sure what's going to come out of this meeting in terms of a final package, but I would strongly suggest that these 4 items be included in any reductions you make, and I'll explain why. The first one is reduction of workers' comp costs, and that's because working with finance, we've determined that amount is actually less than what was anticipated. The next one is the network penetration test that the technology department intends to do in 2024, and we're looking at covering that with ARPA funds. We do have some remaining ARPA funds that were not accounted for through this coming year. The next one is moving the start date of the Assistant City Administrator, Community Development Director back, initially put down for January 1st. I want to move that back to February 15th. That'll save some money. And it's not backing up expectations and when this person would start based upon where we're at right now. We have 26 applicants. The consultant is going through them. We'll be bringing them forward soon and going through the process of determining the candidate, but then giving that person a little time to get here. The consultant is projecting mid-February as a start date. And then the other one also transferring to ARPA would be the traffic signal bulb replacement in the CIP, that's a valid expense for use of those monies as well. So those total $92,000, I believe, is what I came up with. And so I would suggest that those be included regardless of what else you decide to do tonight, because they do make sense as reasonable changes. I'd like to go on from there and talk about the items that were requested by the council at the last meeting. First of all, I want to touch on one that was talked about a little bit and maybe talked about in the next meeting as well, and that's the no fault sewer backup issue. I just want to clarify that whatever should ever come from that now or later, that that does not affect the tax levy or the tax rate. That would all be in wastewater, so it's not an issue that affects directly the bottom line. It affects only our enterprise fund. I'm not trying to minimize it as a topic if people want to go there, but I just want to make sure you understand that that will not be an adjustment that's going to pertain to your final adjustments tonight. 2 things that were asked for by council specifically were an analysis of our variances, that meaning the areas in which we have amounts that are over the last year's amount, at least in a noticeable way. You know, certainly we're not looking at if supplies was $1,000 last year in some department and now it's $1,100. That's not what we're after. We're looking for more substantive changes that I want to call out. So you do have it on your table that was sent to you earlier today as well. I'm not going to highlight everything that the finance department came up with on this list. I'm just going to highlight some of the main items that I think are worth noting as you look at things that are different. The first one is administration, and I think we kind of cleared up this a little bit last time. Very striking that the administration budget is going up by 105%. From 443,000 to 908,000. We had somebody comment on this at the public comment period last time. It's misleading. $313,000 of it is a shift in where the PEP balance is kept. That's the committed balance we have for payment of post-employment health benefits for people who leave and are qualified for that. The remainder, 1/2 of that assistant city administrator position is in here. So with pay and benefits, that's a good chunk right there. And then also the 2023 budget only included a partial year for the HR generalist. Peggy Lyle was hired during the year and we did not budget for a full year of that position coming online. So that makes up the vast majority of that $460,000 difference. The attorney budget you see going up from 175 to 225, this is really just kind of coming to reality. last couple of years, we've tried to stay a little bit lower, but we've always exceeded the expectations in terms of the amount of expense in that department. We're just really matching the 2024 budget with what we are incurring, quite frankly, as costs go up. And we've got the city attorney involved in more things. That's good. He's catching a lot of things earlier for us on contracts and agreements, and but we're reflecting the true cost in this budget. The clerk's budget is going up by a bit, but that's largely because of the elections. We have 4 elections in 2024, where we only had 2 in 2023. And when you take in all the costs that relate to elections, that makes up the lion's share of that difference. On the second page, we have the 3 firefighter paramedics. Again, this is not new positions. This is refilling vacant positions. And that's where considerable cost does come from, the $306,000, as we try to get back up to full staffing. I don't want to note anything else on page 2 in particular. Page 3, I want to note the library increase, but that is largely to adopt a new pay plan to get them caught up to where the numbers that they're showing for comparable positions elsewhere would suggest that they be at. And that is the bulk of that, is getting them on that new scale to get them to a more commensurate level. Planning, I would mark down toward the bottom of page 3. We've had some changes there in the ordinance officer. Now, 1/2 of the ordinance officer position is being charged to that department. We have Kayla and Bob doing half-time for ordinance and half-time for planning. They do some of the associate planner type duties, now that we don't have one, fences and signs and those kind of things. But the bulk of the difference in planning is that other financing uses, if you look at the bottom, the $237,000, that is now incorporating the Economic Development Board budget, which we submitted to you for consideration in the 205 fund that's now housed in the planning department. So really not a lot of changes in planning apart from those 2 items. On the 4th page, you see a fairly significant increase in the shared ride taxi service. And we don't know for sure exactly what that number is going to be in 2024, but we have to make our best estimate. There's a little bit we could do to try and mitigate that. We could look at a possible fare increase, which we haven't had maybe for a couple of years. But we have to be prepared for the fact that it looks right now anyway, like that cost is going to go up for next year. And then streets is going up, noted by 8%. If you look on the last page, you'll see some of the main issues. I want to highlight 2 of the big ones. The street sweeper, we're now having 2 street sweepers instead of 1 to take care of sweeping our streets. A lot of this ties to stuff that Tom Turchie has reported before about the need for us to protect the quality of the stormwater runoff. A lot of people think of the quantity of stormwater runoff and are the pipes accounting for it, but we need to be taking care of what is going into that system in terms of the way DNR views that and what we're ultimately putting out to somewhere. So that's a big issue for us. We've talked about that. I know Tom has done a presentation recently on stormwater. And then later down the line, about mid-page, increase for the snow budget for salt. We need to build up our salt reserve. We obviously go through a lot of salt in bad winters, and that makes up a large share of that difference in that category, the lion's share of it. And then I would note that the zoo is going up a little bit. That's mainly because they're changing their staffing model a little bit, and having a little bit more temporary staff positions, if you will, or part-time staff positions, and getting rid of the overtime to some degree to keep up with the staffing needs. And that bumped up their amount just a little bit. So those are what I would cite from the variances. I think what we'll do now is go to the police and fire overtime, which also was requested by the council. And then we'll take questions on any of what I've presented or what the chiefs are going to present. At this time, I'll call up Chief Jody Gurink, and he'll touch base on the police overtime, particularly with respect to the detective position.
Okay, well, to start out, I'd like to thank you guys for giving me an opportunity to share some information on our staffing levels before you vote tonight. I understand that we're in challenging times, and I'm happy to shed some light so you can have a better look at the whole picture. Overtime numbers are a good indicator for staffing levels in many professions. However, it really doesn't translate very well into, especially the detective bureau of our department. Detectives are not subject to minimum staffing levels like patrol. In most cases, they're investigating are static, meaning that staying late won't help solve those cases. Any evidence that we have has already been secured. There's no other mitigating circumstances requiring immediate action. This leads to rather modest overtime amounts in the Detective Bureau. A significant portion of accrued overtime comes from drug investigations, and which are at least partially covered by a grant that funds our drug task force. Cases that need detectives' expertise and that have extenuating circumstances or happens after hours, on weekends, holidays, at the end of the shift, those could lead to overtime for the detectives, but we would have that regardless of how many detectives we have in our department. The lack of overtime accrual in the Detective Bureau played heavily in my strategy to deal with the budgeting issues that we had last year, or this year rather, in 2023. I didn't promote the replacement for Lieutenant Parks, who was a detective, which that promotion would have come from our patrol division. This left our patrol staff staffed fully, and I did that because patrolmen have staffing levels, minimum staffing levels, and if I took away from patrol, it could drop those minimum staffing levels, which would undoubtedly lead to overtime. In 2023, we have 354 cases that have been brought to the Detective Bureau this year so far. We have another month left. That's as of yesterday morning. 83 of them remain open, meaning each detective has gained about 16 to 17 cases this year to their caseload. This is in addition to the cases that they've carried over from last year. Typically, a detective will carry somewhere in that area of 25 to 30 cases, but that's a variable. To offset the current shortage in the Detective Bureau, additional cases have been assigned to the School Resource Officer, SRO, some of which require the SROs to leave school grounds to investigate. Although we try to keep that to a minimum, it's been necessary to keep up with the caseload and also to provide the best chance to come to a conclusion for our victims. In addition, we recently have been successful in entering a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, with the Marshfield School District to offset the cost, salary, and benefits to our SRO. This amounts to $95,000 a year. That $95,000 is billed to the school and will show up as new revenue source that we didn't have last year, which offsets a lot of the cost of that vacant position in our Detective Bureau. In addition, the investigations are much different than they were back when I started in 1998. We're building better cases against criminals today, and a lot of that has to do with the advancements in our technology. The downside to the advancements, however, is that it takes a lot longer to investigate these cases because to forensically investigate the technology is very time consuming. Things like cell phones are like the computers of yesterday, and they're used in a ton of crimes. Cell phones hold a lot of information and need to be gone through in order to build cases against the criminals. They can hold tens of thousands of text messages and photos, all or most of which has to be examined in investigations, which can be incredibly time consuming. Also surveillance video. We're really happy when we get surveillance video of crimes. However, many don't understand the amount of time it takes to actually obtain that information. You have to scour through hours of surveillance videos, often from several computers, so you can find that crime taking place and piece it together for a successful conviction. The use of social media, online banking, online payment platforms, multiple carriers for cell phones have all brought challenges. We can get information from all these platforms. It's just time consuming to write the subpoenas and warrants and to gather that information. All of this adds on to that workload for the detectives that we didn't have years ago. Earlier this year, I agreed to have our ordinance officers take place in the extra duties combined with the associate planning position, as was mentioned just before. I only bring this up because I support the merger of those two programs. It was a really good investment. Although it causes some adjustments on our end, it saves the city and ultimately the taxpayers money without vastly affecting the service from the police department. It's also filling that associate planning position, which was vacant. I would argue that it actually enhanced our services to the citizens. However, I can't say that if we don't fill the vacant position in the police department. I don't feel it's a good investment. I don't think that it's going to cost a whole bunch of money to fill a position with our new revenue, as well as I think that it's going to vastly impact our services to the community. With that, I would welcome any questions or conversation about the topic and would open the floor to you all.
Any comments, questions? Please put it up on the board. Pardon me.
Oh, yeah. I'm just
Yes.
You're just asking if the council has questions of Jody, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Alderman Spiros?
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Jody, how many detectives do you have now?
Right now, we've got 5 with one vacant position.
5 and 1 vacant
Yep.
position. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm wondering, so if you have purposely limited overtime, then obviously that's not a good measure for saying, do we need that? You had 340 cases this year, 83 are open. Off the top of your head, last year around this time, beginning of December, how many cases do you think were open?
I don't have that number. I didn't look that up. It's a good question, but I would say that we're on pace typically to where we would be every year. It's not vastly different.
And do you feel like you're on pace because you've been using your school resource officers, or?
No, that the amount of cases that come in, we can't control, right? But I think that we're having about a typical amount of cases that are coming in. But where the SROs are being assigned is to help to keep up with that caseload so that we can triage and get through those cases so that we can come to conclusion, and that the lesser or the personal injury type cases don't get pushed off and then just left hanging in the wind.
So do you feel like this year it's been harder to keep up with your cases than last year?
It's been more difficult, well, only because we're incorporating the SROs. Now, with the school investing in the SROs, I think it's right that we keep them there. I don't want to use the SROs to offset that detective caseload.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
Oh, perfect.
Alderman Spiros?
Just one follow-up. How long has the position been vacant?
I promoted Detective Parks, I want to say January. It's been nearly the whole year.
Okay.
So.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, now I'd like to invite Chief Jody Clemens to speak to the fire overtime issue.
Good evening. As we know, at the last budget, we were tasked with completing the overtime analysis. In conjunction with Finance Department, we ran the data for 2023 from January 1st through November 19th. We had 599 occurrences of overtime that lasted less than 3 hours, and had 268 occurrences that were over 3 hours for a total of 867. The 3 hour or less events caused 845.25 hours of overtime, and the over 3 hours caused 2,404 hours of overtime for a total of 3,249.25 hours. We are averaging 10 calls for service a day. Currently, concurrent calls for service is at 24%. Our shifts have 11 personnel with a minimum daily staffing of 8, matching our community risk level. The CBA allows 2 people to be off on leave. If we account for management or another individual off on illness, FMLA, or injury, it brings staffing down to a minimum of 8. We currently staff 2 firefighter paramedics on an ambulance. When 2 ambulances are out at the same time, which is 24% of the time, that'll drop the department down to below the staffing level of 5. We need to maintain 5 for many reasons. First, being able to make entry into a structure on fire On a fire scene, a minimum of 5 needs to be on scene per SPS 330. Also having a reserve in the event of another emergency. Bringing up our staffing will help reduce our exposure to overtime by creating a 1 firefighter buffer on a regular basis for long and short-term overtime. It is very difficult to estimate the cost savings due to the number of variables. Calls that match up with low staffing and also long-term leave. In years where we've had members with long-term work-related injuries, the savings would be immense. This year, we've been blessed in not having much for injuries, so the impact would be much less, but significant, taking into account we are, at minimum, staffing exposed to 24% of the time when we are called to service. This year, we were at minimum staff 132 days this year. I'd entertain any questions.
Alderman Spiros? Sorry.
So you said we had a total of, did you say 3,249.25 hours of overtime?
Yes?
Is there a cost? Can we figure out a cost for that? Just an approximate. I'm sure it's not going to be exact because I'm sure people make different amounts of money. But is there an average or close to?
I'll let my friends in finance deal with that.
Yeah, we'll give them a minute. So if somebody else has a question, we can give them a few minutes to figure that out. If we can. That's all
Alderman
I
Marshall?
have.
I was, if it's okay, Jody, can you come up too? I got a question for the both of you, actually, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
First of all, do you have, for the detective, do you have the position posted or are you ready to hire somebody?
No, we're holding off, and I'm actually glad you brought that up because typically it takes at least 4 months from the time we post to the time we even offer, and that's a really fast-moving one. So
Okay, same thing for you, sir. Do you have the positions posted? Do you have people ready to hire, or is that again going to take some time?
It'll take some time.
Okay, so nobody imminent to hire tomorrow?
No.
No? Okay, thank you.
Overtime dollars incurred thus far approximate $102,000.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
And that would conclude the report that staff is bringing to you tonight based upon what we heard at the November 21st meeting of what was requested of us. We would take any further questions. Otherwise, we can move on to the next phase of the agenda.
Seeing none, move on to item D, council discussion and decision on final changes to the recommended 2024 budget. Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you, Mayor. I am looking at page 4 under contractual services for public works. We still have $287,622 in there for street lighting charges. From what I understand, we're anticipating a March changeover for the street lighting fees. Where would that money go, or can that be taken out of this budget at this time?
So the expenditure still exists. It has a potential offsetting revenue, but it is still money that has to be accounted for in our expense budget. We will be invoiced for that and pay those invoices. So the expense itself doesn't go away. It's mitigated by revenue.
And that's a full year of expenses. Correct.
Correct.
Alderman Tompkins?
Sorry, Jennifer, I'm going to ask you. You might as well just stand up there. Okay. So I understand that you have to put money in categories, so that is still an expense, but we are going to get revenue from that. So could we somehow say that we anticipate that won't be an expense after March?
No, it's still an expense. We cannot net revenues and expenditures in a single account. When you are approving the budget, you are approving the expenditure side. So just because we have an offsetting revenue doesn't mean that the expense can be zeroed out.
Alderman Werman? Unless you have more, Natasha?
Yeah, apologies for any naivety as I go through this. I was just kind of highlighting a couple of the larger changes in the year-over-year expenditures that we were looking at and was hoping that I could understand it a little bit better. So let's call it line item 13 or Excel row 13. The original contingency was Jordan's comment. What is that? Because that's a big increase, obviously. I'm just maybe wasn't understanding it. And if we talked about it last time, I don't remember it.
Yeah, I think Jennifer might highlight this, but this goes back to what we did last year in terms of the expenditure restraint, that we're talking about the very large contingency number, correct?
Yeah.
So there's a program that the DOR has, and they reward participating municipalities for staying within a targeted budgeted increase. That increase is based on CPI plus your factor of net new construction. So year over year, that has varied anywhere from, let's say, 2% to last year we had a really nice inflationary level. So our allowable increase in our budget was 8.4%. And if your budget year over year stays within that, we get a bonus or a state aid. And that's worth, 400 plus, almost $480,000 for us. So as long as we stay within that level, we're okay. Now, some years we might need to increase our budget higher than what might be allowed by the program. So we add in this buffer for those case in the event that we would actually have to go over budget, because otherwise we would exit the program and lose out on revenue the next year. So the intent of this contingency is strictly for that, to give us flexibility in case we have to increase our budget. It's not meant to be spent, and part of the budgetary levels of control say that should we need a budget resolution for monies that come from contingency, it goes back to this body to approve every dollar that actually gets spent out of that account. So you have the option to accept or deny, any emergency item that may come up in the future. And that requires a 2/3 vote rather than just a simple majority to actually utilize those monies. But at the time of the budget, it's never really meant to be used on a purpose other than flexibility in our budget for the program.
Okay, thank you. Then there was the two planning charges. Steve, I think you spoke to one of them already. That's the other financing uses.
You're under the planning department?
Yes.
Okay, let me get there. Let's see. Yeah, I spoke to the ordinance officer. But it also says assistant city administrator or assistant city planner position is eliminated. But the real main thing I want to speak to is that $237,000, which is the funding from the 205 fund, now goes directly from utilities into our, our general coffers. It's the 287 that's going into our general coffers. The 237 is the expense of what we're doing with it with respect to projects furthering economic development, our contribution to Mackey and those kind of things. Maybe I'm not anywhere near what you're asking.
No, I think you are. And what about the contractual services as well? Because that one had a pretty big increase.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm not sure what that is off my hand. I'll have to take a look.
So contractual services would be for...
Oh, I know what it is.
Go ahead.
I got it. Thank you. I don't know why it took me so long. Thanks, Jennifer. Even though you didn't say anything. We hit it at the same time. We are now contracting for planning services and economic development services with Josh Miller and Bryce Hembrook's agencies. And I believe this is the contract with SEH for Bryce's time,
Sounds good.
which comes to about $5,000 a month. So that would be the $60,000 difference you're looking at, basically.
Thank you. And then I noticed there was a couple other big increases, and I guess in terms of overall numbers, maybe they don't look all that huge, but even if you're just looking at the 24 versus 23, like in recreation, we had a 51% increase on supplies and expense. Shared ride, the other financing uses was 73% increase. Streets, building materials, we talked about already, but yeah, just calling some of those things out. Didn't know if there was anything to go over in terms of the shared ride or supplies and expenses for recreation.
So in recreation last year, the budget for pool concessions was removed as part of our budget cuts. So it's not reflected in the number, whereas in 2024, we've brought those expenditures back.
We had, as you recall, maybe, although you were new coming on board, but that we actually made an effort to try and outsource, if you will, our concessions, get a private vendor and not do it ourselves. But now we're back to paying individuals to staff the concession stand.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Welcome back, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay, on the list of a recommended 2024 budget and adjustments due to the pilot reduction, you've got remove EDB's 2024 ED action plan. I don't know that I disagree with that. I think that we do a lot of planning for CIP and also the city's comprehensive plan, which would be something that the new development director would have to work on also. So I'm not too upset about that, as long as the administration knows that we expect to have an action plan developed out from some of our other deliberations, including the budget.
Yeah, and I think my thought on this was that, we're going to have new staff coming on board during 2024, whether we'll be ready to get consulting help and work toward a full-blown action plan is up for grabs. The big issue that we're going to be working with is going to be the Vanderwall project with the 2nd Street corridor, and that'll take a lot of the energy.
That'll take a lot of oxygen out of the room.
It will. It will indeed.
The other thing, I took a look at, and I don't see it in any of the documents I've got here. In EDB's budget, I picked on them a little bit at our first meeting. And I picked on them a little bit about the fact that we were supporting over $70,000 worth of expenditures for a, I don't know what they call her, the lady working from Mackey is an economic development specialist or economic development professional or something. I'm not quite sure what they call it. But part of that $70,000 is the salary, and another part of it is for travel and materials. I said I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to yank that out of the budget. The money that's coming to them now is money from the utilities bonus,
Correct.
Okay, or the dividend.
The dividend.
Okay, that's a different pocket right now, but that pocket can very easily be redesignated as general fund. We could write a journal entry to set general fund, and that would be it. So we could use that to take down 70,000. I still think that would be rather a catty thing to do, is to take somebody's job away from them on live TV. We think they're live anyway. But the point is, maybe what we should do is maybe cut the salary in half, the salary portion in half, and let that go for 6 months with phasing it out over a 6-month period. I don't know, do you see any problems with that?
Well, I'm going to say what I said the last time you raised this, and just a little bit different variation of that. We're going to have a new department head, assistant city administrator / community development director coming online in early 2024. And I think it's worthwhile for that person to delve into what he or she thinks the best model is for effective economic development in our community. We've got CDA, we've got EDB, we've got staff, we've got Karen's position over at Mackey, and go at it that way. And it may lead to a total different change. I would suggest not changing in 2024, but I think that that there may be some opportunities to look at a potentially different model of how we do economic
You're
development.
reclaiming the floor, Madam Chairman. That's all well and good, and I like that. But the problem is that could take place over a year, but we got to have the budget done when we walk out of here tonight. And that's why I'm bringing it up. So I'd just like to hear what everybody else has to say on that, because I know Karen's been doing this for a long time. I know she's getting ready to retire, or she's talked about it, I guess. But I don't know, with the emphasis that's going to emerge from the new position and the position under that, and with the consultancy money for the West 2nd Street project, we're going to be up to our neck in planners. Yeah. So I don't know if we're at too many, or maybe we should look at doing something about it this year to try and recapture some of that money to balance the budget and relieve the amount we're taking out of the general fund.
Just to clarify before you call on someone else, if I could, and I should have put this in front of you again tonight. I think the EDB budget that is on the table right now, but it is actually $53,000, $47,000 toward her salary, and $6,000 for going to certain trade shows and other things that might, potentially get, opportunities to bring business to town. So, but that's that. I just want to point that out.
Alderman Tompkins.
Okay. I apologize to the finance people who have gone over this so many times, and my questions are probably elementary compared to what you guys have already thought about. I am wondering if for when we have areas that we know we're going to have revenue for, so for instance, concessions with Band of Hay or street lighting, if because we know that we will get revenue, we just don't know, like it might not be 100%, we might get 90% revenue. Could we say that 70% of those expenditures that are in the budget, we are going to actually take out of reserve because we know that it's going to get paid back?
As Jennifer is going up there, anything's possible. You can always use general fund reserves for any purpose you see fit. I'm not sure I'd advocate for this one.
Well, but it's what we did when we did the budget resolution for Van de Hey, is we basically took 70,000 out of reserve and then they paid it back.
So that's you can think of that as a net neutral transaction as far as the reserve is concerned. So the reserve is, it takes all of your revenues and all of your expenses, and the difference, if you have more revenue, increases your reserve, less or more expenses decreases your reserve. So that happens regularly. Just every transaction impacts that bottom line. So there are cases where we budget a revenue and it comes in better, and cases where it doesn't. Same with expenses. So net, we hope for a zero impact to the reserve or an increase, but we don't know the result of that.
Right. So if it's net neutral, then that would neither harm or, benefit us. But, and I don't know if it's possible to do this, but if we did it that way, we are taking those expenses out of the budget.
You are, but you'd also have to take the revenue out. So, I mean, if you're looking to lower the total general fund expenditures, but you're doing works, if you're looking to balance the budget, it really doesn't, because there's no way you could have the revenue be in there and not have the expenses in there.
But you said we aren't putting those revenues in the budget.
Which revenue?
The Van de Hey and the lighting.
We did put those in the budget.
You said you put the expenses in, but you couldn't put the revenue.
For 2024's budget?
For the lighting. That's what Mr. O'Reilly asked. He said,
the revenue, we budgeted, I believe, $255,000-ish in anticipation of billing this out. So that is represented in our revenue side of the budget.
Okay.
So we have a revenue, let's say it's $255,000. We have an expense of 285, let's say. So that'll be by default, that means a $30,000 decrease in our fund balance.
Okay. So that idea doesn't work, bummer.
Okay.
Alderman Spiros?
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to the recommended budget adjustments, this page. So there's two things on here that really bother me. And I'm going to say the reduction in contingency bothers me, even though it's only $23,000. And the miscellaneous reductions in Parks Department bother me because I feel like that cut is going to come in hours of pool operation. And I don't agree to that at all because we've already reduced those hours. And it's a brand new, beautiful facility and it brings people in. And we already get enough days that it's closed because of, rain or it's not warm enough or what have you. So I really just don't like those two cuts. I'm concerned, as I stated last week, with hiring 3 firefighter paramedics, only because I fully understand how busy you are, and you explained it very well, and I don't disagree with you. I don't not believe you. It's not that. I'm a little bit concerned about what might happen once we see a merger between the two healthcare systems and what their services might look like or what their plan for their services might look like. We're all banking on the fact that they might keep Marshfield as this level, whatever trauma center it is. Maybe they don't, maybe they choose not to do that. And these intercepts won't go to Marshfield anymore. They would go to a different hospital of their choosing. And I'm just thinking this through only because if we hire them and that happens, we can't then not get rid of them because we've slowed, our pace has slowed down. So that is a concern. And that's the reason I'm concerned. It's not anything to do with how hard the department is working right now, because I fully believe they are working hard. And I believe that that they do need the extra help if things stay the course that they are right now. If nothing changes when the merger happens, I believe fully that they need this help. But what I'm looking at is we've put specified dates on here for the firefighter paramedics, delaying till 7/1, delay refilling of the police officer until 5/1, delay the city planner until 5/15. So I'm wondering if we did some fancy math and we delayed refilling the 3 firefighter paramedics, maybe we hire one of them on 7/1. Maybe we hold one of them off until 10/1. Maybe we hold one of them off till 11/1. Same with the police officer. Instead of 5/1, maybe we push that off till 7/1. And the city planner, maybe we go from 5/15 to 7/15. Looking just to try to not reduce contingency, not close the pool down any more hours than I want it to be operating at the level it's operating at. I know that's sort of some fancy math. It also buys us a little bit of time with knowing more details about the merger and how that's going to play out. And I apologize, I probably should have asked you guys this question earlier, but it really did just hit me now as we were sitting here. So I'm sorry that I didn't think of that earlier and have you work that math out. I can give you some time on that, and we can go to the next person.
Steve would like to make a comment.
Yeah, just a couple things. First of all, I mean, at the time that I put this list together, I was working remotely and I was in conversation with the Park and Recreation Director, Justin Casperson, and he was looking for some possible cuts. At no time did I ever suggest that we ought to cut pool hours, and I don't think he wanted to volunteer that. Anyway, we want to keep Van Hay Waters open the same as we've done, because obviously it's a facility that we put a lot of time and effort and money into. So that's not on the table anyway. That's not what any of those cuts would entail. On contingency, at one point, it looked like we were gonna have $100,000 contingency. I'd like to be a lot closer to 100. It's kind of wound down because of some things we found and had to deal with. So I respect you greatly to wanting it, have it a little higher than 65. I understand that. And I also respect and appreciate your opinion on the staffing issues. Ultimately, that's your call, how you want to handle that.
Okay, so I would like to know then what the plan is on that reduction from the Parks Department, if Justin could speak to that, but also, the reason I feel very strongly about preserving our contingency fund, because I do know that there are some expenses coming up, and they're pretty pricey ones. We haven't really talked about that. We haven't addressed that, but I know that they're there. And I know we're going to absolutely have no choice, but we have to do, the one in particular I'm thinking of, we will have no choice. We will have to pay for what's coming up. And I don't know if you're comfortable with talking about what that is or not.
Are you talking about the big one?
Yes.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Certainly, it's been the elephant in the room for a long time. And some of the dollar amounts that we're talking about here tonight, when you look at the list of potential cuts to meet this pilot reduction, aren't going to come anywhere near it, but they're a start toward it, if we're thinking of the same thing.
I'm talking about the equipment at the fire department.
Oh, I thought you were talking about I thought you were talking about the revenue, which might come from paying taxes.
Well, that too. I mean, that too. But
Okay, but
I'm talking about an immediate expense that I fully expect will be brought as a budget resolution within a few weeks
Okay.
of passing this budget. And I think
Okay.
it's just important that we talk about that, because we're going to have to pay for that. That is an absolute must. I don't know how we get around that.
So in short, I'll make this really brief so people haven't heard about it. In short, our the bottles that we use for our SCBAs, which is self-contained breathing apparatus that we go into fires with. The Department of Transportation takes care of the regulation of those bottles. There was a change in the DOT laws. We use aluminum fiberglass wrapped tanks, and they have made they made a regulation that they only have 15 years life. Prior to that, every 5 years, we'd go get them taken in and get certified. And if they pass, you can use them again for another 5 years until they fail. This change obviously changed something with us. When we got our bottles when we bought them, obviously no one told us about the DOT regulations. Secondly, when we went and get our bottles recertified every 5 years, that vendor didn't say anything to us. We went to a different vendor and they made us aware of it. Which of course, 77 bottles, quick math is $112,000, 500. Huge. But what we did was we were able to, and Deputy Chief Mueller's here, who did a yeoman's job of taking care of this and doing research on it. We were able to find a new technology out there that was able to recertify these bottles with the DOT. The United States Navy had this issue. So they ended up finding a way to get their bottles recertified. Really briefly now, to come down to the money of what you're talking about, is that we were able to take care of this and look at it. Instead of $112,500, we were looking at about $32,000. This $32,000, in speaking with finance, Wednesday before Thanksgiving, we spent about 2.5 hours together crunching numbers, which finance is happy doing, but that's not my forte. We ended up looking at this. There were 6 lines in our current budget that we have left. In short, there are a few projects that we stopped. Chief's travel budget, I put a stop to that. And all of these funds, as long as we shut them off right now, didn't spend anything more for them, we can do this project in this year's budget, having no impact.
That's great. That's great news. Do you know then how long, with this new method of recertifying them, then how long before you would have to have them looked at again? And is there a way we could space that out so we're not looking at all of them at the same time?
Absolutely. Deputy Chief Mueller, we've got a plan together. He put it together really well. That what we're going to do is we're going to get these 77 bottles recertified. Then that's going to give us an additional 5 years. Then we're looking at the 2025 budget and putting a line item in there for $10,500 so that what we can do is incrementally redo a few bottles at a time, not creating spikes in the budget, to be able to keep that flat, to be able to just keep on replacing these bottles as we go. So we have a long-term plan.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great. I'm glad you guys checked into that. Very, very good. Thank you so much.
I would like to add the other.
That's a little bit of a relief.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I didn't recognize what you were talking about. I
No,
apologize.
that's okay.
But,
I didn't know if.
The other item I thought you might be talking about, though, is what I bookmarked some of this for, is we're going to have a presentation tonight, actually, from our compensation consultant from McGrath. And there'll undoubtedly be some level of adjustment that we'll be seeking to do in 2024 to salary. So I support any increase we can do in contingency if that's possible. I mean, things come up during the year. We deal with this all the time in budget resolutions and so forth.
Right. Okay. So yeah, if maybe if we can come up with just a little bit of an adjusted schedule on the hiring of those 3 that have dates attached to them other than the ACA, CDD. If we could adjust that a little bit and maybe, like I say, to lessen the impact to the fire department, we just, kind of just do one delayed till 7/7, the second one delayed till 9/1 or something like that. So the impact isn't, or at least getting somebody sooner than nobody.
Justin, would you please do me a favor and invite the people that are sitting out to come in and have a seat? Thank you very much. And Alderman Werman?
Excuse me. And then,
yes, ma'am.
Then if Justin can kind of talk to us about the reductions.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Wait.
Yep. Did they go outside? Oh,
I don't know.
I have no idea.
And they felt like they walked in wrong.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Okay, thank you. Justin, did you want to?
Justin, could you address the potential cuts? And at one point, you and I had maybe talked about it a little bit more, but just maybe jot what you came up with as a possible cut.
Steve asked last week about cutting 10,000 from the aquatics budget. I don't think it's really feasible at this point to make that cut. I think we'll have to look elsewhere. There is some savings we did discover. Part of the challenges is when we started the aquatic center, we had credit card transactions there, and we were covering all those credit card transactions. In the last year, been working with our software company called ActiveNet, and we reversed that this year. So now the customer will be paying for those transactions at a tune of about $7,000. So we won't be incurring those costs. We'll also make a cut to our travel and training budget for administration. So we're removing $1,000, which we usually allocate for Leadership Marshfield for any of our staff members to attend. So we'll forego that. We haven't sent anyone in probably 2 or 3 years, so that's not much of a hit. And then we'll also reduce some asphalt paving in our budget. Usually we budget about $25,000 for crack filling and seal coating at different parking lots in different areas. We'll just reduce that from $25,000 to $23,000. So that's going to make up that $10,000 rather than using the aquatics budget, which is pretty minimal at this point.
So I'm fine with all of. I'm fine with all of that then. So we would just be looking to, with the suggested changing of the dates to just making sure that we're taking less out of contingency.
Right. So right now with delaying those firefighters, the police detective and the city planner, as we presented, we were going to delay or save about $197,000. If we push that back further to the date you gave, we're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of $360,000 worth of savings.
What dates, that $360,000 in savings, what dates are you looking at for all of?
So the firefighter would have been the 7/1, 10/1, and 11/1. The police detective would have been 7/1, and the planner, I believe, 7/15. 7/15.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, I had a couple follow-ups. So I wanted to jump back to the detective and the school resource officers. It sounded like we had some good news in the sense that the school will be covering the school resource officer in offsetting that position cost. And I believe the number thrown out was 95,000. What we didn't ask is when does that come in? Is that going to be on a school year basis? Is that going to be on a calendar year, school year? Okay, so we can't expect that till probably next school year, or are we going to start?
Steve, I don't know if you had further conversations with the district at all, but at one point they were looking at 2 payments, I
Yeah,
believe.
correct. 2
every
payments
year,
during the
so-
year, but they're covering the entire year.
Because their fiscal year runs differently than ours does, so.
Yeah.
Right.
But they were intending to cover the entire year with two separate payments during the year of that total 95,000.
Would that start though because it's on the school year, would that start for the 2024 to 2025 school year? Or would we be going like January 2024, covering that half of the resource officer for this school year?
Well, the contract date would start when? Yeah, okay, yeah, so I mean, it would start 1/1/24.
Okay. Well, that's good news. So that would be a whole expectation. Was that considered in the reduction here?
That was considered in the original budget. I mean, the revenue from the school resource officer in full was included as a revenue source in the 2024 budget as presented.
Okay, and I'm asking because it sounded like that'll offset the cost primarily of the detective. There'll probably be just a little bit of leftover, but then I saw we had a delay refilling that police officer here till 5/1. So that's why I was asking, is that 30,000 there, is that part of that savings? Because it sounds like that 95,000.
Well, the savings would just simply be that position with pay and benefits not being filled for that length of time.
I'm not sure I follow.
Well, I think by talking about the school resource officer revenue, it's kind of confusing. In my mind, it is. Maybe it makes sense to you, but
Well, I'm bringing it up because it sounded like what Jody was saying is that the school resource officer, that 95,000 would essentially offset the cost of a detective. There'd probably, like I said, would be a little bit of.
Well, it does comparing last year with this year. I think is what he means. If you look at 2023 budget versus 2024, and you think of it the way he's talking about it, it makes perfect sense. But the 2024 budget as presented, had the detective position being filled right away from the beginning of the year, had the school resource officer, had the SRO payment from the school district being full year. And now all we'd be talking about is backing up a few months, the start of that police detective position.
Okay. So, and I'm trying to think like big picture here, long term. We're talking about possibly filling firefighter positions and stuff like that. I know equipment has been a huge topic over the budget season, but also tonight. Do we have the equipment to support the additional firefighters? I know that was a line item at one point.
I believe, yeah, the amounts you see here include uniform, turnout gear kind of stuff, I believe, that they need to start, correct? You can, sure, that's fine.
If there's anyone in the hallway, you're welcome to come in and have a seat in the back of the room till the meeting is over. If there's anyone in the hallway, please come in and have a seat. More comfortable than that concrete thing out there in the hallway.
Yeah, appreciate the question. Yes, we have that in the budget. We've adjusted some things and yes, we have that in the budget.
Okay, perfect. So then, like I said, I think that covers my questions. The last thing I was going to throw out there, and again, I think I take this back to the last meeting, is I think thinking big picture, I don't think we're doing ourselves any favors going into next year's budget season if we delay starts, because these are all costs we have to consider in the next budget. I mean, I would highly suggest if we hire at least one firefighter, that offsets the cost of that overtime. Not entirely, because it's not going to take care of all those hours. But if it's 102,000, we're projecting 3 firefighters at 312,000. That comes out to 104,000 per position. So that right there is the same cost for one firefighter. Again, there'll still be some overtime because there's going to be more hours than what that firefighter would be allotted to. The detective, I mean, again, that goes back to the savings there. If that's offset by the school paying for those resource officers. I mean, I think the cuts that you have proposed here are not bad, but I think that if we either remove those positions or do not delay the starts, I think those are going to make or break our next year's budget. And I think that's something we really need to consider before we motion forward with this.
Alderman Tompkins?
I'm sorry, Mayor, Mr. Stauber was next in line.
Oh, I'm sorry. Alderman Stauber?
I would like to make a motion to approve the recommended 2024 budget with the pilot reduction with one change, meaning the 3 firefighter paramedic positions, fill one of the positions in second quarter, postpone the second and third position until we know the outcome of the medical merger and service levels that'll be provided. And until this time, we don't have any idea when that merger is going to occur, if it will occur, and what the service levels will be.
Second by Alderman Giles. Is there any discussion on this motion? Yes,
I
Steve.
guess my only question is for finance staff and costing that out, what he just said. And I don't mean to put you in this right now, but I'm just trying to figure out in my mind what that would look like in dollars.
So for reference, looking at the 2024 pilot reduction page, my motion would be to approve the 2024 budget for those reduction amendment or adjustments with the one exception, meaning the 3 firefighter paramedics position, fill one of those positions sometime in second quarter. The second and third positions, postpone the filling of those positions until we have a better idea of any medical merger and level of services that'll be provided.
We're waiting actually for them because we're going to get a motion in a second.
Yeah.
They had asked a
Sorry.
question.
Yeah, Giles is no second.
Right. So are we waiting for them to answer Rebecca's question before we go on to the next question? Or I know the finance is, Rebecca had asked the
I see what you
question.
mean. Yeah, I
Okay.
don't know if they're going to have a number for us right now.
Okay, so we'll start back with Alderman Tompkins, and when the finance department gets their answers, they can jump in. How's that? Is that fair for everybody? If it happens
I guess
tonight.
we're discussing now the motion at this point, right?
That's exactly what I didn't want to go
Perfect.
forward, right?
Perfect.
Yes,
Gotcha.
thank you.
Gotcha.
Yep. Yes, Alderman Spiros.
Regarding the motion, I mean, I do think it's important for us to hear a number. I think we have to wait
That's
to
right,
hear from them
exactly.
before
I
we
agree.
can
Yes.
vote.
I just meant
Because I
maybe-
think that's going to make adjustments to other things. I mean, that's going to change, your contingency reduction or something. You could make adjustments.
You're obviously right. I just thought that while they're trying to calculate it, maybe other people had concerns or questions about the concept that he's expressing could, weigh in.
How do we know what they want to talk?
Jennifer's coming to the lectern as we speak.
Okay, so the revenue reduction for the pilot, we had established at $340,000. The recommendation or the motion that Mr. Stauber put forth would result in savings of $442,000. Which is more than we need, so that when we talk about balancing the budget, so we always do that once we establish where we want the expenditures to be, then we do that expenditure restraint contingency all at the end. So if we do that, our total budgeted expenditures are still going to be the $26,555,000 with a total contingency level so rather than the original $1,264,000 that we approved earlier, we would need to increase that another $408,000 for a total contingency of $1,761,000. That keeps our budgeted expenditures at the level, at the exact same level that we approved earlier. And then what that calls for in terms of fund balance applied just to balance revenue and expenditures is $355,000. Now, this is just really in terms of that expenditure restraint program. It doesn't mean that we are actually going to consume that contingency and therefore that fund balance applied. I just want to make sure that that's clear to everyone.
Questions answered? Yes, hang on a second. We have a motion and a second. So I'm not sure if we are to go through that first before we hear everyone else's comments.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Yeah,
So discussion, Alderman Tompkins. I just want to make sure we do everything right in the first meeting back. So,
no,
and
that's
I'm not
fine.
going to apologize because that's the way life is.
That's fine.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the motion on the floor is that we would hire one firefighter in the second quarter and then indefinitely suspend hiring of any firefighters based on a merger that we have no information about. We do not even know if the merger will go through. And it's completely no data on how it will affect the EMS system because there's been no data. So it would be all merely speculation. So that is saying that we're going to base all these decisions on speculation, but we do have data that our fire department is overworked, that they are using so many hours of overtime, that they are so tired, they're on the point of being burnt out, and they've been asking for 3 years to have these positions filled. So this is not where we need to cut the budget. We need to let them hire the first firefighter in the first quarter. If for some reason they can't find someone, well, we've saved money while we've waited. We need to let them hire their second one in the second quarter or their third one, but they need to get this. They can't wait another year to fill these 3 positions. This is an easy way to balance the budget, but it is not a wise way to balance this budget.
Alderman Weigel? Okay. Alderman Wagner?
Thank you. The one thing, when the finance department came up with a number, they were using basically specific dates, like October 1, July 1, that sort of thing. If there would be, I would like Mr. Sauber, if he cares to do so, to instead of saying quarterly, to say what quarter they should be hired, give the month they should be hired, so it's something specific, that a target that both the department and the administration can shoot at. I would appreciate that. That would make the numbers much more firm in my mind. The subject of the merger that's vexing because, as Alder Lady Tompkins said, we don't have any data. We're not in the loop to find out if and when there will actually be a merger. And one of the concerns that was expressed early on was that if there was a merger and the merging company, one of the merging companies already had their own ambulance service, that we would have basically staffed up for something that we didn't need. That we would have done 3 positions that we didn't need to put in because our call volume would be reduced by that. I think after reading up on this a little bit, I see that the company, that one of the companies doing the merger does have its own department, but it also allows that if the merger is taking place in a community that already has an ambulance service, they would likely contract with them, which would mean that what would happen to us would be absolutely no different than we are dealing with right now with our contract with Marshfield Clinic Health Services. So I think with that one little twitch in it, I could support this. And I thank Alderman, Stauber, right? Okay. Stauber, I thank Alderman Stauber for his insight into that, because this certainly takes takes away the need for us to do some more slaughter of the budgets that are presented to reach the point we wanted. So I will support this if we can lock in those dates. So thank you for the floor.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you, Mayor. I can support this as well. It is a difficult one, and we've been making too many decisions lately, not having enough information to do it. But the thing that I do like about it is it does get them some quick help. And it also leaves the door open for us when we do get the information we need. And that, from that perspective, I think it makes sense. With that, I'll leave it with that.
Alderman Tompkins?
So I'm just clarifying, when I hear my fellow council people say that they're supporting this motion, you are supporting hiring one firefighter this year and no other firefighters. That's what the motion is. Is that correct?
That is correct. Alderman Stauber?
It doesn't necessarily say no other firefighters this year. It just says postpone until we have more information. It could be the first day of the third quarter for all we know. We don't know.
No, this merger would not change anything in Marshfield for 2 years. So you're saying postpone for 2 years until we get more information?
Well, I don't know that it's going to occur in 2 years.
I mean, yeah, there's no change in how Marshfield Clinic's being run, even if it happened tomorrow, for 2 years.
Just to clarify though, under Councilmember Stauber's motion, if there was a desire to take on either of the other two firefighters yet in 2024, you'd have to find a funding source. Contingency would obviously be a potential funding source. We've talked about the size of contingency, but otherwise there wouldn't be a funding source under the current motion for adding more than one person in 2024. And but if I can ask Jennifer, can I assume that you used 4/1, April 1st, when he said second quarter, or did you use a different date?
We used the end of the second quarter.
End of the second quarter, okay.
But if somebody wants to clarify that, we certainly can. So expense for 1/2 of the year for one firefighter.
Alderman Werman?
I mean, just going off numbers, and I'm just throwing this out there to play advocate a little bit, because I know I was suggesting just one position be filled. But hypothetically, if we looked at 2 employees for the year, looking at a full-time gig, that's 4,160 hours for 2 full-time employees. Easily covers the amount of hours that have been covered by other employees, plus some. So even if you went to 1, there's still going to be overtime, but these are things to think about when we're talking about the amount of hours that are currently being served and what the expectation is.
Any other comments, questions?
Vote on the motion.
Vote on the motion.
Could you repeat the
Yes,
motion,
would you
please?
please review the motion, Jess? Thank you.
This is just, I'll let Alderperson
Russ, would you-
Stauber correct
yeah.
me if I'm wrong.
Okay, perfect.
But we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the 2024 budget with the recommended adjustments according to the pilot reduction sheet that was provided, with the exception of the firefighter position, which would replace one firefighter at the end of the second quarter, and postpone the second and third firefighters until the Marshfield Clinic merger is complete.
Just one more time, we would have the money in the contingency fund if in October we just said, look, nothing is changing, we need to bring one more on. We would be able to do a budget resolution and pull the money out of contingency to hire in October a second firefighter.
Correct, second and third if we wanted to, based upon the size of contingency that the finance director explained to you earlier.
And if I could, just to clarify, the motion that was reread made it seem like the merger was a trigger point. It's not a trigger point. The merger is just one step in the expected process. We still need to know what the services will be.
Okay, continue to vote, please. Motion passes 7-2.
Thank you.
Request to approve resolution number 2023-61, determining and levying the amount to be raised by taxation for city purposes for fiscal year 2024 and approving the 2024 city budget, presented by Steve Bard, City Administrator.
Thank you. Finance Director Jennifer Selensky had put together the resolution that you have in your packet for this meeting based on the fact that what was going to happen here tonight was not going to change the total levy or the tax rate being assessed for municipal purposes. That remains true tonight with the result of your vote earlier. So we would recommend approval of resolution 2023-61 as presented.
We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Wagner, second by Alderman Weigel. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Motion passes 8-1. And now we are adjourned. Thank you all. And we'll just take a